for August 3rd, 2020. First, let's start with the roll call. Mr. Davis?
Here.
Mr. Coleman? Absent. Mr. Golden?
Here.
Mr. Metcalf?
Here.
Mr. Milling?
Here.
Mr. Burrows? Absent. And William Guess, myself. So we have a quorum. We have 5 members. It takes 5 members to vote in affirmation of a variance request, either in for or to deny, depending on the motion. And then we have, as part of our agenda, to adopt the agenda for today. Has everyone seen it? Okay, motion to adopt the agenda.
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Adam made the motion and Louis made the second. All right, we'll get started in order of application 6322, which is a holdover.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm admitting Mr. Garstecki as well as his survey.
Okay. I will read the procedures, Margaret, in those applications where I think we'll really need it, which will be when we start our public hearings on case 6333, if that's acceptable.
Yes.
Okay, so we're at 6322, 206 Carmel Drive East. And this is a request for a holdover from previous.
It's recommended for denial. Hold on, I don't have the surveyor in on voice yet.
Okay,
Margaret, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is Brett Orrell.
Okay, good. I have Mr. Garstecki in.
Yeah, hey Margaret, can you hear me? This is Alan.
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes. Was your wife going to participate?
She's here with me now. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, is she on a separate line or are you together?
We're together.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Chairman.
okay. Well, forgive my pronunciation, Garstecki.
That's correct.
If you'll give us your name and address for the record, and then why we ought to consider your application for the variance.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
Recommended for denial, so tell us why we should consider otherwise.
Okay, sure. Alan Garstecki, owner of 206 Carmel Drive East. I'll start by giving a little bit of background on the property. Our property has several special conditions. Probably one of the main ones is there's a drainage easement on the northern portion of the property, which allows the Austell Estates subdivision, which is the property to my rear, to tie into the city sewer. And so it prohibits me from building on the north side of my property there. Another one is it's unusual shaped lot, as you can tell from the survey there. So it makes the porch placement, which when I'm asking for, difficult to place anywhere. That makes a ton of sense. The rear property line falls at an angle, so the northern corner of the house is only 16 feet 7 inches from the rear property line, and the southern corner 55 feet 6 inches property line. From the way I understand it, the spirit and intent of the ordinance is to provide a buffer between residences. And if you look at that survey there, there's a detention pond drainage ditch in that common area too. That if you'll, and you can see by some of the photos I submitted as well, that's a 45-foot plus or minus buffer between the east lot line of the property and the rear neighboring lots. So in spirit, I would say there is still a significant buffer intact, because there would also be obviously a setback for those subdivision lots there to my east. And then I would say, not contrary to public interest, there's no opposition from any neighbor and property owners. We actually have a letter from the owner developer of Austell Estates subdivision who does not oppose it. I think you've got that in your file. So I would really just like to back up to that drainage easement to show you that picture that you've got on the screen now. That would be the edge of the porch that I'm asking for the variance. And as you see,
Margaret, can you back up, please, on
Yeah.
the screen? There you go. Thank you. Proceed.
yeah, there was a photo there that she just took off. That was where do you see the 16 feet and the 26 feet come into that corner right there? That stake in the ground that's that placement of that porch. So I was just trying to show you guys that if you see in the background there, that's right. So that's where, that would where the porch would end in the current setback. Is then you'll see the landscaping and everything that kind of goes up the hill. And then right on the other side of the shrubs, if you click to another picture there's another angle. Yeah, there you go. Those are those shrubs, and you'll see where it falls back down into the detention area ditch. And then back up the hill is on the top of the hill to the right, where I don't really have a picture, but it's where the property line for the other setback for the other lots are. So I just wanted to show you that there is a significant buffer still on that corner of the property line where I'm requesting the variance.
Okay. Any questions of the board members for the applicant? Okay, now, does your wife have anything in addition to add to your statement?
No, she does not.
Okay, did you have anyone else that was willing to speak on behalf of your application?
I do not.
Okay. Margaret, he referenced a letter from the homeowners association adjacent.
Yes, sir.
Do we have that on file?
Yes, sir, we did. We do. It was just, we had it available when this first came up, and I'm sorry, with the rollovers to the subsequent meetings, it hasn't made it to you.
That's okay. I just verifying we have it on file.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there anyone in opposition to this application today that's in the waiting room?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, that would conclude our public hearing on this.
We
Questions or
do
comments
have,
of the board? Pardon?
we do have his surveyor, Mr. Orrell. He is in the meeting. I'm not sure if he wanted to speak or not.
Oh, thank you.
I know-
That's why I asked if we had anyone else in support of it. Do you
Yeah,
have anything to add? Yes.
Mr. Guest, yes, the only thing I would add to kind of follow up on the applicant's comments, because I think he covered it really well. The drainage easement that he keeps referring to on the north side, that is something that they gave up to the developer in order for that development to move forward. So it created an encumbrance on him, and in my mind, a hardship on him advancing that further. That project had to have that connectivity in order for the drainage to work. So he did give up quite a bit of rights there for using that property, and I think that's important to know. And the developer, in turn, obviously was not in opposition and was in favor for him getting to utilize this additional property up to that rear setback or rear property line.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the board or the surveyor? Okay, once again, this concludes our public hearing on this application. Staff recommends for denial. The applicant has provided various justifications for consideration and hardships to consider. Chair, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move for approval of the application.
Okay,
Second.
I have a second. That was Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion with a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, the application's approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.
All right, Margaret, we'll give you time to clear the waiting room and bring in our next guest.
Okay, thank you.
Burr, are you in the room, the waiting room?
Bert's in the meeting.
Yeah. Is he watching for Mr. Coleman or Mr. Burrows to?
I have been, and I've sent a message to our secretary to try and contact him. I've been trying to monitor the waiting room as well to
Okay.
see when he comes in.
Well, I know
I
you're
did
recording.
call.
All right,
Oh,
thank you.
I called about 5 minutes ago and got voicemail from Mr.
Okay.
Burrows.
Okay, Andrew, are you in?
Hey, Bert, did you call his cell?
Mr. Burrows, no.
All right, I'll see if I can get him.
Okay, it says Andrew's still connecting to audio. Let me try one more thing. Okay, hold on. All right. Andrew, can you hear us?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Do we have just this individual or do we have others in the waiting room?
That's the only one.
All right, this is application 6218, Spring Hill Village LLC. My understanding, this is an extension from a previous permit issuance, a variance, I guess.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and the staff's recommended for approval. Are you in agreement with the 1-year extension?
Yes,
Okay. For the matter of further record, give us your name and address so that we have it on record.
Andrew Prescott, 41 West I-65, Service Road North, and it's
Okay,
Mobile, Alabama, 36608.
all right. Any questions of the board for the applicant? They're requesting a 1-year extension. Okay. Staff recommends for approval. Chair will entertain a motion.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I have Mr. Milling made a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
And who was that? Mr.
Lewis.
Bowman? Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone in opposition? Okay, motion carries. All right, that was quick. Margaret, we'll move on to the next.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Bert, I didn't see where anyone was calling in for number 3.
That's correct. They were in agreement with the recommendations.
Or do we have to have someone present to make the application?
In the virtual meetings, we have not been requiring that if the applicant was in agreement with the staff recommendation and there was no one signed up in opposition or with questions.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, you're okay with that?
Yes, sir, I am. That's fine.
Okay. All right, this application 6333, road surveying engineering regarding 4580 Shipyard Road. Staff's recommended for approval for the surfacing variance request and conditions, land disturbance, right-of-way permit, and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, sir.
We have no one in opposition. Chair, entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Millings has made a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Golden. All right, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right, application 6334, 5431, Ryco Signs, 55 North Water Street. Do we have someone in the
Yes,
audience?
I'm admitting Wade Wright. And then I'm looking for Bill Davis. Okay, Wade, can you hear us? Says he's joining.
Do we have anyone in opposition?
Bert,
No, sir. It's recommended for approval. And just to clarify, the description of the variance that's written on the agenda is not correct. It was a quantity limit, not a size limit.
Okay. So the number of signs, not necessarily the coverage.
That's correct.
Okay.
it keeps saying he's joining, but it's,
Well, their application, essentially, if you look at what Margaret has on the screen right now, image number 1 and image number 2, those have been permitted and installed on Water Street. And they're wanting to install those same signs on the side street, which is would be in view 3 and 4. And then they're also asking for permission to install a projecting sign that is not mounted at the corner of the building at a 45-degree angle. They want to mount it at a 90-degree angle to the side facade.
And the reason we're hearing this is because it's in the downtown development district.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If this was in a different area, would it not already be permitted based on the number of streets frontage?
They would be limited to a total of 3 signs if it were in another area.
Okay.
So they would still have at least 1 variance.
Okay, do we have Wade yet?
I want to say still,
I have a quick question. So who's the applicant is Ryco Signs, but is it for the city of Mobile?
It is for the city of Mobile, yes.
I mean, I'm honored that they would ask.
They have.
Well, because the building is not owned by the city of Mobile, they are subject to the regulations.
Understand. That's the caveat. All right. Thank you.
Bert, I'm unable to get Wade in. What is the last name of Kelly that works in his office?
It's a good question, sorry.
Well, Margaret, this is very much like the one at the water, or at the,
It is recommended for approval.
right. And did the applicant's rep have any concern about the conditions?
No.
Okay, then I would say we probably can proceed.
Okay.
All right, this application is recommended for approval with conditions. The applicant's rep has not shown any reluctance to accept the conditions. It's application 6334, 5431. I should say the applicant is representative is in agreement with the recommendations and the conditions. For the downtown development district, additional number of signs and placement. And it's regarding, I think what you call it. Oh, 55 North Water Street. So Chair will entertain a motion to approve, subject to staff's recommendations.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposition? Okay, motion carries. All right, we'll let you work on the next group, Margaret.
Okay. Hopefully it'll be more successful. Okay, Mark Hammond should be in. And I'm trying to admit Joey.
Bert, we had comments from the community on this one, did we not?
You did, but they were in support
Hello.
of the 6-unit apartment as proposed.
Okay. Now, one of the comments, and maybe I'm thinking of a different application, was about wine tasting or a wine room.
That's a different application.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have admitted a gentleman named Joey and then Mark Hammond. Can both of you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Who's the applicant for the variance request?
Joey Vegelsich, I'm the owner of the property, the Fernbank Apartments. Mark Hammond, I think, filed the application for the use variance.
Okay. Well, if you'll give us your name and address and why you're in support or why you're requesting the application.
Yeah, so Joey Vegelsich, 7396 Adamore Court, Mobile 36695.
Okay. And then have you seen the staff's recommendation?
Yeah, and I'm in agreement. Looks like they recommend approval, limited to 6 units, which we're okay with. And we intend to apply with all municipal codes and ordinances. So we're happy to oblige.
Okay. And you've met with the community and it appears they're in support.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions of the board for the applicant?
Mr. Chair, if I may, just because I need to read it into the record due to the virtual meeting, you do, as you referenced previously, have 2 comments in support. One submitted by Ms. Brenda Bolton on behalf of the Government Street Collaborative, and then another by Tim Manis for the Line Cough Historic District.
Okay. And now we had somebody else that was in the meeting room to speak in support of this application.
Mark Hammond, and he's in.
Okay. Yes, sir. Your name and address, please.
Mark Hammond, 8178 Soldier Court.
And you're in support of the application. Anything to add to the statement?
No, I'm in support, and just to remind the staff or inform them that this variance was applied for last year and approved, and it just expired, so we had to reapply for it.
Okay. Yeah, I think I remember this application. All right. Any questions of the board for the applicant and Mr. Hammond?
No questions here.
Okay. Staff's recommended for approval and the applicant's in agreement with the conditions. Chair, entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
And who was that, Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
And that would be Mr. Miller, correct?
That's right.
All right, we have a motion with a second to approve with the conditions. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, Margaret, we'll move to 6336, 6162, please.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
If there's anything wrong with Mr. Metcalf's microphone today, he's not so as chatty as he usually is.
I can hear you.
I think
Hey,
Margaret's been muting him when he didn't realize it.
I mean, I've never had to make so many motions in one meeting.
Hey, Jeremy, I'm doing that on purpose to you, but I can hear you.
Never had to make so many motions in one meeting.
Hey, Jeremy.
Someone has the live stream going in the background. Please mute it.
I think they found it.
Okay. I need to check then and make sure I have admitted everyone on this application. Sherry Webster,
Here.
Jim and Catherine Flowers,
We're here.
David Schumer. Okay, Taylor Atchison. Hold on, I may need to admit them via cell.
Now, do we have anyone in opposition to this application?
Yes, we do. I'll get to that in a moment.
That way I can read the procedures.
Okay. Bert, are you able to access the waiting room?
No.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. David, can you hear us? David Schumer?
I can't.
Okay, who is this? Oh, it says connecting to audio. Ah, here we go. I think you called him.
Taylor's 510-4532.
Whoop. There we go. Okay, Taylor, are you in?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, David, are you in?
I'm in. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Okay, Mr. Chairman, everyone that has asked to speak is in the meeting. Once you call the application, I will read over the names that have been submitted via the portal and email, and then you can begin with the applicant.
Okay, this is application 6336, 6162. 921 Dolphin Street, 926 Connie Street, David M. Schumer, Barton Schumer Engineering. Let me cover the procedures for this meeting. When an application is called, staff will admit everyone that's concerned with the associated application into the meeting. Once all those involved, interested parties have joined the meeting, I will cover the rules. Basically, it's 4 maximum speakers in support, 4 in opposition, with a limit of 5 minutes each. And then once the applicants presented their case, the 3 additional speakers will be allowed to speak in support of the application. And then we'll ask questions of the board, then we'll go to those in opposition. I'll give the applicant an opportunity to respond to any comments or statements by those in opposition with a 2-minute limit. And then after that, we'll go into deliberation and the decision will be made. Everyone will be put back in the waiting room virtually. So, Mr. Schumer, your name and address for the record, please.
David Schumer, Barton Schumer Engineering, 3213 Midtown Park South.
Okay, Margaret, you want to read to us who's in support and who's in opposition in the waiting room?
Yes, and they actually have all been admitted, everyone that wishes to speak today. We have, though, the board was provided copies that were submitted via the online portal from John Klotz. He has no real comments, however, has concerns about the inclusion of a bar in the project. You have an email from Mr. and Mrs. Catherine Flowers. They are also on the meeting with you today. They have general support, but they do have areas of concern. We also sent you an email from Ellen Marlar. Again, has concerns about the wine bar, and the board has been provided a copy of that, as well as an email from Sherry Webster, who is also in opposition, and she is in on the call today as well.
Okay. All right, Mr. Schumer, we'll proceed. Have you seen staff's recommendations?
Yes, we're actually going to request a holdover to be able to add. We had a approval for some revised parking lot lighting from a couple years ago that has expired, and we're going to ask for a holdover to be able to include that as part of this application again. Okay. And we're also going to revise the south parking area to be gravel in addition to the front parking. So we were going to request a holdover to include those 2 items. And we did meet with Captain Allen regarding the fire department requirements for the aggregate surfacing. And he was in agreement that as long as we had a geotechnical engineer verify that it met the fire department's requirements for load and all weather worthiness, that he would be permissive to allow the aggregate surfacing.
Okay. And have you met with the community regarding their concerns?
I believe the developer had met and talked with some of the members of the community, but we haven't had a formal community outreach.
Okay. Any questions of the board for the applicant? The applicant's request a holdover, but we have individuals in the meeting room that have comments. I'm going to allow the time to provide their comments so that Mr. Schumer can take those into consideration. All right, anyone else in support that has anything to add to Mr. Schumer's statement today?
Hey, Bill, I'm not sure. Can y'all hear me? Am I mic'd up? This is
Yes,
Taylor
you are.
Atchison.
Okay, your address, please.
1108 Dolphin Street. I am the developer on this project, and like Mr. Schumer said, we do have some additions to this variance request regarding the aggregate in the south parking lot that we will be submitting, along with some lighting that I believe y'all were the same board that approved it several years ago, but it wasn't on this paperwork. So we're going to revise that, hopefully, if we're granted a holdover. I did come today so I could address any comments that the neighbors had, and I wanted to be available for any discussion that we needed to have.
Okay, we appreciate it. Is there anyone else in the waiting room that's in support of the application?
No, sir.
Okay, let's give those that are in opposition their allotted time to make a statement, please.
That would be either Ms. Webster or Mr. and Mrs. Flowers.
Well, we'll start with Ms. Webster.
Hi, this is Sherry Webster. I live at 13 Common Street. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. Can you tell us your thoughts regarding the application, please?
Well, I sent a detailed email. I don't know if you received it and you've had a chance to read over it or not. I received this notice in the mail, and nowhere in this notification did a wine bar / restaurant was even entered in this. And the only way we found out is because Catherine Flowers had gone online and read the whole proposal. And this is a historical neighborhood. And at first, it was my understanding it was going to be a wine bar, but after speaking to Taylor, he informed me not only a wine bar, but also a restaurant. And this literally backs up to my fence, my backyard, along with Steve May and Ellen Marler. And the patio area where they are putting a wine bar literally is in my backyard. And there's just a fence separating all of the neighbors, and literally in also Steve May's backyard. Customers, when they go to a wine bar on a patio, they're going to go outside and smoke. So if they're smoking, I'm smoking if I'm in my backyard, because obviously smoke carries. There's going to be people out there drinking, loud talking, there's music, and this is a private, quiet neighborhood. So I'm very opposed of any wine bar restaurant going in this area. I have no problem with apartments. I bought this home 24 years ago. And when that building was there, I knew that one day that might be either turned into condos, which I would have preferred, besides rental. And, but I knew that there was a possibility of that being turned into for more residential. But there's a wine bar right around the corner on Dolphin Street called Red or White. We do not need a wine bar in our backyard. And the traffic on Common Street is already horrible, as y'all well know. It's a cut-through street, and people go flying down our street. They don't stop at the stop sign. And the speed bump does nothing. It's useless. So, and also after speaking to Taylor, my understanding is he wanted to cut windows on the east and west side of the building. And I'm opposed to that, as to people will be looking directly into all the residential backyards. So once again, losing all of our privacy that we've all lived here almost over 20 years that we have enjoyed. So this proposed project was never even talked about. He never called a meeting to try to meet with the neighbors. He's just now reaching out to try to set up a meeting with the neighborhood after the fact. I think it's very basically sneaky of trying to get, in my understanding, is this to be implemented. But I also have a problem because all the parking would go literally on the back side of my fence. And I understand that's gravel. And right now, there's hardly there's not that much traffic back there. But when you've got a wine bar, now you've got people from the apartments parking there, going in and out. You've got all the gravel noise. You've got all the gravel dust that's going to could fly into our yards, on our vegetation, our flowers, and our furniture. So I know some people would prefer to have the gravel. I personally would not prefer to have the gravel in my backyard because of all that would cause because of all of it that it could cause.
1 minute.
You have a minute. Go ahead, proceed.
Okay, and and that's pretty much, like I said, we don't need any more traffic with Common Street, and already Conti Street is already going to have now a tremendous, and as you know, Steve May had just moved a house on that corner, and he already gets a lot of traffic contact from Government to Dolphin and Caroline. So this is just going to intensify, and this is not the entertainment business. Entertainment is east of Broad Street. We don't need any more bars or restaurant in our neighborhood. And that's really pretty much, like I said, I oppose this highly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions of the board?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Margaret a question? Margaret,
Yes, sir.
Doug here. This application is just for a parking and access maneuvering variance, correct?
That's correct.
There is nothing whatsoever before this board, Ms. Webster, dealing with the use of this property. This property is zoned LB2. There's nothing that they are asking to change from LB2. They're not asking for a wine bar. All they're doing is asking for a parking variance or parking and access maneuvering variance. We have nothing to do with what's the use of the property on this application today.
Well, on the application, it also states proposed project, and the wine bar is proposed on the west side of the property. So,
but that's not before us today. There's nothing having to do with the use of the property in this application. If I don't know if it's zoned properly for a wine bar, I haven't not investigated that. Margaret can answer that, I guess. But all we're voting on today, or excuse me, they're asking for a holdover, but all this application is just a parking and maneuvering variance, and that's it. I understand your concerns.
Well, and the applicant stated they're going to come back with some additional variance requests for the lighting, I think, and some other things. Ms. Webster, do you understand what Mr. Anderson was saying is that our board only has authority regarding the variance request, not the use? They're not asking.
Yes, I understand that. But we wanted to make it known that we do see what is proposed and we're in opposition of that. But I'm also opposed to the gravel parking lot.
Right.
For the retail, wine bar, and residents of the apartments.
Okay.
Chairman?
Yes.
Ms. Webster?
Yes.
You mentioned that you were opposed to the stone, or if you call it gravel, parking lot. And you said for some obvious reasons, and I'd like to understand what your reasons for that are.
The reasons is that more traffic that will be going in and out of that from the Dolphin Street side literally backs up to my fence, which is in question already because they've come on the property and cut my fence and added on another fence. So there's going to be a walkway that goes through on the other side of my fence to the wine bar and to the apartment.
Ma'am, let me interrupt you a second. That doesn't address my question. What they're asking for is a variance for the type of surface that will go down instead of asphalt or concrete. So again, we're only here listening to the request to use an alternate material, which is generally, or oftentimes used in a residential neighborhood. But so that's what we're listening to. So again, I want to make sure that you understand what we're listening to or addressing is is aggregate or stone in place of concrete or asphalt?
I would prefer either paved or asphalt or some type of paving besides gravel.
Adam, she gave a fairly extensive description of her concerns regarding gravel.
Okay, all right.
All right, okay, thank you, Ms. Webster. Do we have somebody?
Thank you.
In the waiting room? Mr. and Mrs. Flowers?
Yes, I'm here. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, my name is the Reverend Jim Flowers. Our address is 922 Conti Street, Mobile 36604.
And you're in opposition to the application for the.
Well, let me just preface. We said in our email that we're not opposed to the project. We're in fact, I think it's a great idea for mixed use, and the Atchisons have always done things the right way. But we just want to be in the conversation. Taylor has graciously extended an invitation for all of us in the neighborhood to meet. So we're going to do that, I think, later in this week. But we've got several concerns on our property. First of all, we are just immediately proximate to the Atchison property. In fact, 2/3 of our property abuts to the existing buildings at Atchison Home. And then straddling our property line in the front third of our property is a heritage oak that I'm sure was planted here before this house was built, and our house was built in 1895. It's probably 7 to 9 feet in diameter. It's a huge, massive live oak. So we're very much concerned about its viability. It gives massive shade to our house. It's on the west side, immediately on the west side of the house, and for obvious reasons provides shade and therefore decreased utility bills. It's also beautiful. It's just kind of a signature aspect of where we live. So we're concerned that if there were paving on the south part of the property, that would very much disturb the root structure of this heritage oak. So we are very much in favor of a aggregate surface to the parking. For one thing, paving holds heat, and it also we're a few inches down the hill from Atchison's property. So if it were paved on the south side, we would probably get storm runoff. So paving is definitely a concern of ours, and in particular, just to protect the root system of this heritage oak. We've already asked Peter Toller to come look at it, which he has done, and Taylor met with us here with Catherine and me to talk about that. So he's aware of the oak. And then the other thing that we're concerned about is lighting. Our bedrooms are on the west side of our house and will face this parking area. So we obviously don't want to be drowned out by ambient light on the west side of our property. There's a proposed possibility of a structure, and I realize that we're not talking about that today, but that structure is proposed to be immediately under this oak tree. So I guess, and we can talk about this with Taylor when we meet, but we would like to keep the parking area away from our property line, which would protect the oak, and it would also give us a little bit of privacy and distance. So as long as we're, we just want to be in the conversation. I'm sure we can all work this out, and it'd be a win-win for everybody.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in opposition to this?
Matt, this is Jim Flowers again. Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
I think on the plan, Taylor had mentioned to us that there would not be that they would use the same curb cuts that are there as they are. But I think the plan shows, or Taylor had mentioned, the curb cut would be closer to the oak. We just want to alert the engineer and the developer that this, the root system of this oak tree extends a good 30 feet out from the property line. So we just want y'all to be very much aware of that.
Okay. All right, Margaret, do we have anyone else in opposition to the application or has comments?
Not attending the meeting.
Okay, any questions of the board for Mr. Flowers? All right, Mr. Schumer, do you have anything in response?
Yeah, well, one of our revisions and request for the holdover is to revise the south side on the Conti side, which would be around that tree, to gravel for various reasons, including protecting that tree. All of those drives are currently gravel, and the current parking lot in the front is gravel, and that we're just hoping to maintain. In the south would be to, maintain the existing and, add some of the protections to the tree and help with drainage and, all the other reasons that are beneficial to use a pervious type surface.
Okay, question, the parking ratio, do you have more than is required or are you meeting the minimum?
We are right at the minimum.
Okay. Because if
We're hitting the requirement.
If you had a reduction to protect that tree, that may be a hardship that might be considered. So, all right, any questions of the board? You've asked for a holdover so you can revise your plans, and it sounds like you or some of the property owners are willing to meet with the neighborhood to discuss some of the other issues.
Hey, Bill, this is Taylor. Yeah, I just wanted to thank the neighbors for coming out, and David said basically, what I was going to say. Our goals for the aggregate is certainly to protect oak trees and drainage, to leave it in kind of a soft residential fashion. We certainly understand their concerns, hoping to get together with them, not trying to pull anything over on anyone. We've been here for a long time and hope to be here for many, many more years. And we will certainly be meeting with the neighbors and working through any issues, and hopefully be back in front of y'all in a few weeks to get the aggregate and the lighting variances underway.
Okay, that was my next question. How much of a holdover, 30 or 60 days?
30 should be sufficient, Margaret, and then we're good with it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think unless the board has any questions, that concludes our public hearing. Even though the applicant requested a holdover, I wanted to show the courtesy of public comment. Chair entertain a motion for a holdover at the applicant's request.
Mr. Chairman, I move for a holdover of this application.
Okay, Mr. Metcalf made a motion. Do I have a second?
Yep.
And who was that? Mr. Milling?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have a motion with a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Margaret, we'll give you a chance to clear the waiting room and bring in the next group.
Now, next is Sean Rowan. Okay, at this point, we should have in the meeting Sean Conklin for 4287 Horlester Court.
Okay, do we have anyone else?
No, Mr. If you would, please cancel the live stream in your background. Thank you.
All right. This is application 6337. We still got the live stream going on. Okay. I think-
Is this better?
Yes.
Nope.
Nope.
Hold on. Are you in on your phone as well?
I am.
Okay, let me try something. Okay, speak now. Let's try the opposite. Okay, can you speak now?
I can speak.
Okay.
I think we resolved that. Thank you, Margaret. Okay, this is application 6337. Mr. Conklin?
Mr. Conklin, that's right.
Yes, will you give us your name and address for the record? And based on staff's recommendation, I think yours is recommended for approval, the conditions.
Okay. My name is Sean Conklin, and my address is 4287 Horlester Court, Mobile 36608.
Okay, and you're in agreement with staff's recommendations with the conditions?
Yes, it looks like that based on their recommendation that it is, they recommend approval, I guess, conditional on the traffic department, I guess, giving their consent as well.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I don't know if that, okay. I mean, yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, normally they just want to make sure you're not putting something up that will interfere with line of sight, create an additional hazard. Okay.
Right, okay.
Margaret, do we have anyone in the audience either in favor or opposition to the application besides?
No.
Ms. Conklin?
No, sir.
All right, any questions of the board for the applicant?
Yes. What happens now?
Well, I'm asking the board if there's any questions.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
You're fine. All right, we have none. Staff recommends for approval, subject to conditions. The applicants agree. Chair, entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Millings has made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Davis is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Your application is approved, sir.
Okay.
All right, have a good day.
Thank you.
All right. Margaret, we'll allow you to clear the room and prepare for the next.
Let me see. I do not see where the next applicant is in the waiting room.
Okay.
Let's come back to that.
Is there anyone in opposition?
Well, it's recommended for denial.
Right. Okay, so that works in favor of anybody in opposition. Okay.
Margaret,
so
do you have anyone with a 205-613-0240 number?
No, I only have one phone number in the waiting room, and that is for item number 9.
Okay.
I have one person, and I was going to message them. They're identified as Cherry or Sherry.
That's the architect for this project.
Okay. I'm admitting them now.
All right, thank you. And once again, you have no one in favor or opposition other than the architect.
That's correct. And they should be in the meeting now.
Okay. Ms. McNabb? Sherry McNabb, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, my name is Joe Dellery, 7065 Main Park Drive, and that's Montgomery, Alabama, 36117.
Okay. This particular application has been recommended for denial. You want to tell the board why we ought to consider otherwise?
Yes, sir. This application is, our client is a dialysis facility, and they have engaged the developer to prepare alterations for their occupancy in this building. And the building is an existing building, and it had housed the teaching aids store previously. And so the existing conditions of the site in preparations for the new tenant have remained. And our intent was to leave the existing conditions of the site to remain as it suited our tenant's purpose. When we had submitted for a building permit, there's an existing dumpster pad on the north side of our building that does not have an enclosure. And so when we had submitted for our alterations, our client had desired an enclosure, and so proposed an enclosure around the existing dumpster pad. And that pad, or that enclosure, unfortunately falls into required zoning buffer between our property, the adjacent residential property.
Okay. With the exception of the enclosure, did the pad meet all other conditions required for code?
The pad was an existing pad, so we did not have any provisions for plumbing, drainage, and whatnot. If that's what you're alluding to, I'm not sure.
So will you have to create that in addition to the enclosure? Because that's a condition now for dumpsters, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir. And we have provisions for that. We intend to comply fully with the code with the new dumpster.
Okay. Margaret or Bert, did we have public comment regarding this application?
There were no opposition.
No opposition. And how long was this facility in use as the teaching aid?
It was built, the building was built back in, I believe, 98. It's referenced in the staff report. So it's approximately, it's a little over 20 years old. And I believe that was the purpose of the building.
Yeah, it's been there as long as I can remember. Okay, so it's the intent of the applicant to leave the dumpster enclosure or the dumpster pad and just bring it up to current code otherwise.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions of the board for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Bert, can you hear me? Is Bert on the line?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What is the staff's heartburn about this?
Well, back when the building was originally developed, if a dumpster pad was going to be placed with enclosure, it would have had to meet setbacks when the building was originally developed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't brought to staff's attention. So now that they're making the improvements, we're trying to get it into compliance.
All right, where would you propose that they put that pad? Right there?
At the end of the parking lot where Margaret is pointing to.
Okay. All right. Does the applicant, what is their main heartburn about about moving the dumpster to the proposed area of the asphalt parking?
So if we were to move the dumpster pad and closure to that proposed area, we'd have to also add some sidewalk along the back side of the building to connect the location of the future storage room doors, which would be mostly used by the people that are throwing the items away in the waste. And so it would put the dumpster enclosure on the exact opposite location of where our tenant finds it to be.
Right. And it looks to me like from a safety standpoint, just looking objectively, that if the dumpster were where Margaret's pointer is, that truck's going to have to pull in from either direction and then drive through the center of the parking lot where patients are going to be coming in and out, I'm assuming. So it looks like it would be a safer scenario for it to be where it currently exists, but that's just from looking at it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions of the board for the applicant? Is there a loading dock in that same area, or is the loading dock on a different side of the building?
Yes, sir. The loading dock's on the same side. The grade difference is not necessarily one that would require a ramp, but the double doors that go into the storage that are performing loading and unloading is.
So it will serve both purposes, the dumpster and then the delivery receiving area.
Yes, sir.
Okay. To the north is an apartment complex for the elderly, if I remember, seniors.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have anyone from their office complained or had any comments regarding the current dumpster time and pickup and all that kind of stuff?
No, sir.
Okay. They'll probably appreciate any improvements. It may make it even better.
I hope so.
The only thing I can say is that maybe the time of service may be something that you want to make sure it doesn't change where it creates a unnecessary disruption to the occupants of the complex. Okay. Any other questions or comments to the board before we call for a motion? Okay, this application, as originally stated, was recommended for denial. However, the applicant has stated that it's an existing condition and that they're just improving, bringing it up to code other than the setback. Chair, will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the application.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, Margaret. Application 6339, you want to clear the waiting room and bring in our next guest? Bert?
Yes, sir.
Did we not hear this application within 6 months?
This is a different location.
Okay.
It was last heard by the board in October, and that was one block.
I'm getting an echo. Say that again, please.
This location is one block south of the application that was considered in October.
Okay, thank you.
The person with the cell phone number with the last 4 digits, 7902, you're giving feedback.
Okay, how am I to fix that?
Are you listening to the live stream?
Yes, ma'am.
Mute it.
Okay, is it clear now?
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Oh,
It's
great.
delayed and it'll
I'm
give
sorry.
feedback into the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Chairman, everyone that has signed up to speak on this is now been admitted into the meeting. Let me kind of call roll just to make sure that everyone is here and can hear. Jared White is the applicant. Joe Womack,
Here.
Monique Harden.
Here, present.
Thank you. Zach Rosenberg. Zach Rosenberg. The last one is Reginald Hill.
Here.
Okay. We have,
Excuse me, this is Reverend Dr. Elaine Crittenden, 7902. I'm on the line.
Oh, thank you. I apologize. You were on the previous page.
Yes, ma'am.
do we have
Okay.
everybody in the meeting?
Except for Zach Rosenberg, but he is not in the waiting room, but I'll keep an eye out.
And who was the applicant?
That would be Jared White.
Okay, Mr. White.
Good afternoon.
Good
I'm making
afternoon.
Hold
making
on.
this application. sorry.
Hold on. I think the chair needs to call it and go over some rules, please.
Yes. Okay, this is application 6339, 5800 African Town Community Development Corporation, 400 African Town Boulevard. We'll go over some basic rules. When an application is called, or an applicant is called, the parties concerned will be brought into the meeting, which Ms. Pappas has done now. The board's rules are 4 in favor of an application and 4 in opposition with a limit of 5 minutes per speaker. The applicant will be given the opportunity to present their case with their 3 additional speakers. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll ask that the board, if they have any questions, present those at that time. Once the board concludes their questions, and then we'll move to those that are interested to speak in opposition, 4 as well, with a 5-minute rule. And then the applicant will be given a 2-minute opportunity to respond. And then we'll clear the, we'll consider the public hearing closed, and we'll go into deliberation. And at that time, all interested parties will leave the meeting and we in the waiting room so that we can conclude the application, consider the variance request. All right. This is for use, parking surface, buffering, landscaping, tree planting, setback, and signage variances to allow a market in a split zone B2 neighborhood business district with and R2, 2-family residential district with substandard parking surface, no residential buffering, no landscaping, tree planting, reduced structure setback, and non-compliant signage. The zoning ordinance requires a B3 community business district for a seasonal market with compliant parking surface, residential buffer, landscaping, and tree planting, compliant structure setback, and compliant signage. All right, Mr. White, you're the applicant's representative.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before we get started, may I ask something or request? Almost everything that I have seen in opposition to this, everyone continues to refer to this as a change in zoning. And the last thing I want to do is sit through 5 people that are not, or whoever, or does not understand what's going on here. And maybe if you could do a synopsis of what is truly being requested, so we don't have to answer that question every single time.
Well, actually, I may ask Margaret or Mr. Anderson to do that. So
Okay.
that, I agree. I think that would be very helpful for those in attendance.
And to please pay attention, folks.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, how about you start? You want to tell us what we're considering today?
Sure. They have requested 7 separate variances. Only one of them has to do with use. They're asking for a use variance to allow a market in a split zone property. It's currently zoned B2 and R2. This application has nothing to do with rezoning the property. They're asking to be able to use it as a market. That means if this was approved and the market operated for 3 years or 10 years, once that market quit being used as a market, then it would still, the variance would go away and it would still be B2, R2. So this is not a rezoning. The other 6 variances have to do with the development of the property concerning parking, surface, buffering for trees, landscaping, setbacks, and signage. So 6 of the 7 have to do with how the property would be developed or lack of development. And the 1 has to do with the use of the market.
All right, Margaret, anything to add? Did we lose Margaret?
No, I'm here. Mr. Anderson's correct. Before the applicant and the other interested parties get started, I did want to read into the record the names of those that have submitted documentation via email, telephone, web portal. And I also want to bring to the board's attention, there was someone that came into the building to attend the meeting in opposition, and that is Tony Allen of 660 Shelby Street, Zach Rosenberg, Dr. Elaine Crittenden, who's speaking, Joe Womack is also speaking, Louise B., Kern Jackson, Elise Stingberg, Walter Moore Jr., Deborah Giles, via phone, Mary McConnell and Patricia Simmons. And then via the web portal, you have Michael Blakely, John Klotz, Monique Harden, who has signed up to speak as well, George Crozier. And that's all that we have received.
Margaret, how many people are in the room that are in opposition? Do we have more than 4?
At this point, no, I believe we had 5 signed up, but Zach Rosenberg is not in the waiting room. So I believe we have 4 in opposition.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, let's continue. Mr. White, you still with us?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon to the board. Thank you for consideration of this application for variance. I'm making this on behalf of the Africatown Community Development Corporation. Mr. Cleon Jones is the president of that group. He's watching, as are other board members. We were in front of the Board of Zoning in October 2019, as was referenced earlier, applying for variances to place a market on property directly north of this parcel. As you might recall from that application, this is in connection with the community garden at Africatown. It's called we abbreviate sometimes to ACDC, so I'm going to use that. The Africatown Community Development Corporation operates at Jakes Lane near the Mobile County Training School. A couple of years ago, they realized that they could enhance what they were doing with the garden by having a market to sell produce from the garden, and also to help alleviate the food desert issue that exists in the community, having a place to get staples, whether it be bread, eggs, milk, something like that. Right now, the alternative is having to get on a bus and or take a car and go into Saraland, is really the closest grocery store. And it can be a 2 or 3 hour trip if you have to take the bus. So this would really help the local community residents who are struggling to easily obtain things they need on a daily basis. You just improve quality of life in the neighborhood. Of course, obviously, there'd be some positive publicity that would come with the marketplace. Other people driving by could stop, learn more about this historic community. And, the idea would be that hopefully this would complement the Welcome Center that's going to be built with Restore Act funds across the street on the Hill property. In any event, when we were here in October, there was some opposition from the neighborhood. A lot of it centered on a misunderstanding, as Mr. Metcalf referenced. People thought or suggested there was some subterfuge to rezone property and convert it to business or industrial use. And of course, that was not the case, because then, as in now, it was a use variance. There's also some opposition because of the proximity of the parcel involved to local community churches. And so there's some suggestion that this could impact that operation. We explained at the time there'd be no market on Sundays and none on Wednesday afternoon, but we understood that was a concern. Ultimately, the vote was 4 in favor and 2 against that application. We then went and regrouped and looked at what we could do to address the concerns that were raised. And we were able to negotiate with Chippewa Lakes, which had offered the property previously, to move south to this larger parcel that's the subject of this application. It's a 4-acre parcel, about 2.5 times the size of that other parcel. It's directly on Africatown Boulevard and Bay Bridge Road, which puts it further away from the churches and would minimize traffic and any disruption to the churches further. Of course, Chippewa's allowing a bigger piece of property to be used for no charge, and so we took a little persuading, but they were generous and agreed to do that. And so that's why we're here today. We're in a situation where there was a state grant for this market. If that grant, if the market cannot move forward, that grant is going to end. We've got extension after extension from the state. They've made clear there will be no further extensions. So if the board denies this variance, that money will be returned. There will be no marketplace in Africatown. This is our last chance to have one. This location, we believe, is consistent with the Africatown plan, which talks about businesses at the entrance of the community, although I really don't consider this a business as much as a community event. I will also point out that this property already, again, this is not zoning, but to show that the variance use is consistent with the neighborhood in this property. This property is already partially zoned B2. You can put a grocery store in B2 property with the appropriate setback. So if there's enough room in the strip of this property to have a setback and do a site plan, put a grocery store, you can have a grocery store. So the use that we're requesting is not inconsistent with what that property is partially zoned for. It's certainly not inconsistent with what's in the neighborhood. There are significant buffers between this property and any other residences. The closest residences are across Africatown Boulevard, which is a large, busy street, and buffer from the churches. We believe it's appropriate use. As far as the other site improvement variances, it gets back to resources. While there are resources to start the marketplace and you have the 10 have the portable buildings, they're not the resources to do all the site improvements that would otherwise be required to develop this parcel. And so we're asking for a variance. And as I indicated last time, hopefully this goes well. And hopefully the success of the market attracts additional grants and contributions. And long-term, a permanent site could be erected that has beautiful buildings to conduct the market in, has all the site improvements, landscaping, et cetera. But in the meantime, this offers an opportunity to get the market up and running and improve the community. And that's what the community is trying to do. I certainly would ask as other speakers present their opinions, which we all respect, that you balance what's being said against what's being proposed. And is it better for the community to have this marketplace or not? Because that's really the decision. It's not, can it be somewhere else? This is it. It's not here. It's not going to be anywhere else. So thank you for your time and your consideration. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions of the board for Mr. White?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple questions.
Proceed.
All right, Jared, first, as far as the kind of how it would operate on that property, kind of without having a more detailed site plan, can you kind of go through, how it will be laid out, kind of what you foresee and how the flow of the property will work? And, it seemed like to me that in this application, the improvements were much more temporary in nature than maybe what was proposed before. Can you kind of talk through that a little bit?
Absolutely. you know, the concept is essentially the same as it would have been for the other property. And that there will be a large tent that will be erected. Of course, have to meet the necessary fire codes and other requirements of the city to use the tent. Under the tent will be the tables for the vendors selling produce and other items at the market. Additionally, there'd be two small temporary buildings that were located or currently still sitting on the other parcel, empty and unused, but would be moved under this parcel. One of those would serve as storage for tables and chairs. The other would have kind of the staples we talked about, the food, the milk and the bread and the other things in the refrigerator, eggs and refrigerator. Marketplace would be operated, initially probably 3 days a week, which would be a Saturday and then probably 2 weekdays during normal hours, business hours. If things go well, it can be expanded to operate with the exception of no operations on Sunday and no operations Wednesday after 3 p.m. so as not to interfere with churches. Traffic would be off Bay Bridge Access Road, although we're certainly open to any additional input from the city traffic department, but that appears to be the most logical way to access the property. Ideally, we would probably put the big tent and the temporary trailers on the southern portion of the property, with some setback from Bay Bridge Road, but toward the south end to allow parking on the north end as people are entering. They can park there and then walk south into the marketplace. It's a much larger parcel, so it gives a lot more flexibility about layout, and we're open to laying it out in a way that best suits the city's interest or the board's interest and the communities. And as you said, this really is temporary. It's, quite frankly, it's not as pretty a parcel as the other parcel. They're not the big trees and shade that the other parcel had. It's just a big, basic concrete parking lot. But it's in a place to locate it, and we hoped it would address the concerns of the churches by moving further away from them.
Right, thanks. Second thing I want to ask you is, and I think I've stated this back in October, I was just really shocked at the opposition to this originally. And I guess, it became apparent that it seemed like there was a lot more going on there. And what I took away from it was really because of, I think, the history of maybe that property and surrounding properties and the owner of the property with the community, that there was a distrust of this being something that opened the gate to commercializing that area and those parcels of land, which the community seems to be very much against. And I guess my question is this, based on that, did y'all look at any other areas? It just seemed interesting to me that come back, directly across the street after there was so much opposition to it. Did y'all look at other areas, or were there just no other areas that seem to fit what you're trying to do? How did you arrive at this parcel directly across the street?
Well, Mr. Jones led those efforts and discussions with his board and community members to identify this property. Basically, it was brought to me as the place that it should be relocated to, and I then negotiated with Chippewa to get their agreement to use it. I hear what you're saying about the concerns. Quite frankly, what you get down to is what other, in this same question was last time, what other properties are available, much less they'd be available for free. If you get up near where the garden is, there's a school there and there are residences. There's not empty property of any magnitude, certainly not empty available property. And it's always been my personal opinion, and I think shared by Mr. Jones's board, that bringing traffic of visitors into a neighborhood by a school just isn't a good idea. That if the market is successful and generates traffic, you don't want to increase the traffic right at a school and in a neighborhood. It'd be better to do it at the fringe of the neighborhood than bringing it into the core of the neighborhood, just for a marketplace. There was some discussion last time about using the credit union. I don't see, which is, you probably zoom in and see it, but it's almost immediately diagonal from this property. I don't see that it makes any difference from a commercial standpoint of the community, but quite frankly, that property has a building on it. And so it's just Chippewa, which owns that, wasn't willing to allow free use of a property with a building on it versus an empty lot. And so, which I can respect that. They're allowing us to do this for free. So that's where we're at. And, anyway, and I understand the historic issues that linger in Chippewa. And I don't represent Chippewa, let me be clear about that. But, I think they have been trying to make amends in some way to the community, and maybe this is the first step, hopefully. At least, again, I'm not speaking for them, but I see this as a way of trying to, increase their community relations by doing something for the community.
Mr. Millings, or do you have any further questions?
No, sir, not at this time. Thanks.
Okay, is there any other questions of the board? Mr. White, I've got a few.
Yes, sir.
Okay, what's the hardship with the substandard parking and surface?
Well, I think the hardship is that the zoning ordinance for Mobile does not specifically address temporary markets or really temporary uses other than, it talks about circus use. That's about the only temporary use. But I think there's the code basically has a dichotomy with the requirements for site improvements versus the temporary nature of this enterprise. And so I think it's a hardship to require site improvements that contemplate a permanent use and for a temporary use such as this.
Okay, and signage, what's the plan for signage?
Minimal, and we're open to suggestions. I think we talked about maybe a sandwich board when the market's in operation and maybe a small sign hung off the tent. One other thing, Mr. Guest, we had discussed last time, I think we're willing to accept as part of a variance, like a 2 or 3 year variance because of the temporary nature of the enterprise and the understanding that, we're asking for the permanent site improvements to be waived because it's temporary. So we would accept a 2 or 3 year variance to allow us to be conducted on a temporary basis to see whether or not it'd be successful to justify the permanent improvements.
So what you're suggesting is a time limit on the variance?
If that makes the board more comfortable with the request, we're willing to accept that.
Okay, one last question. The site is larger than the previous, so why do you need a reduced structure setback?
I'll be honest, we just asked for all setbacks so we give flexibility how we lay out the site, but I don't think that's essential.
So there's not necessarily a hardship for the setback?
Yes, sir. That's fair enough.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I've got one more question.
Yes.
Jared, you mentioned before, at least, and I want to, that's what I want to make sure and clarify that, some of the opposition last time that was brought about by the churches. Have y'all, and I guess I'm sensitive to this because it's not in a public meeting, we're in a Zoom meeting. And just to kind of understand, did y'all work out with the churches some of those issues with regards to this site, or do you know if there's still the same level of opposition from the different churches around there?
I know Mr. Jones had some discussions with church members. What I've seen in comments that were posted that have been provided to me, I did not see comments talking about church traffic. What I saw, and I'll just put this on the table, an email sent out by Mr. Womack to a number of people in Mobile saying that this was a rezoning of property done as a subterfuge to turn property into, residential property into a business. I also accused Mr. Jones of giving away the Hill property, which is where the Welcome Center is located. Neither of those are true. It's not a rezoning, as y'all have already made clear. The Hill property is going to be used for the Welcome Center because federal funds are being received for that. The city of Mobile required the property to be put in their name in order. You can't get the federal funds if the city of Mobile doesn't hold it. No money was exchanged. It will be held by the city of Mobile for use of this public Welcome Center for the community's benefit. But the point is, I haven't seen any concerns by the churches being voiced so far. Maybe some today, I don't know. Our hope was by getting further away, we'd alleviate that. I'll just say, I do believe there are some people who oppose this not because of any of the merits or lack of merits of it. They oppose it because they see if one organization is successful, it somehow may diminish their organization, which is unfortunate. But I'm concerned that's what's going on here.
Okay. Any further questions of the board? All right. Margaret, is there anyone else in the waiting room wishing to speak in favor of the application?
No, sir.
Okay. And now we'll move to those in opposition. If you'll announce their name and then we'll get their address.
Okay, I'm just going to go in order of how they signed up. Dr. Elaine Crittenden.
Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Your name and address.
Can you hear
for the
me?
record? Yes, please.
Okay. This is Reverend Dr. Elaine Crittenden, 415 Craftmore Drive, Pritchard, Alabama, 36610.
All right, good afternoon. You want to tell us why you're in opposition to the various variances the applicants?
Okay. What I'm going to start out with, I'm going to simply read to you what I submitted, and we'll go from there. And my email goes this way. I would like to introduce myself. I am Dr. Elaine Crittenden, the individual appointed by Mayor Jimmy Gardner to represent the interests of Pritchard and the Africatown project. And in addition to agreeing with the statement that will come forward later by Major Joe Womack, I also want to inform the board that this is not only impacts this community, it has a worldwide impact. While I was touring Amina Castle in Accra, Ghana, which was once the home to the most tragic and brutal periods in American history as far as the inhumane treatment, the transatlantic slave trade, I was informed that the last ship hit the United States was the Clotilda, and an area our tour guide said was the last slave ship who ended up in a place called Pritchard, Alabama. Needless to say, I was amazed at the pride that this man took in sharing the story. I would like to ask the board to consider the nationwide, worldwide, and historical impact it will have on these communities as they are being rebuilt. This project will become a magnet for not only tourism, as well as encouraging those who have moved outside of the area to return with pride and admiration. Now, with that said, my concern is that it appears from my studying this and reading things that happened last year and this year, my concern is that the fact that it has this marketplace has to be in that area, that there's nowhere else that could be possibly found to put this. The other thing is I've talked to other individuals as well, and I've not heard anywhere why this representative has put together a forum of any kind to invite the community in, social distancing, Zoom or otherwise, to find out what the people want. My part in this is to find out what the community wants and act on behalf of the mayor to make sure that this is a smooth transition, working with the other cities for this project. I've not heard yet anything from, I'm sorry, I don't know the gentleman's last name, Jared, that says to me that this absolutely has to be in that spot and that money or that grant or whatever it is that he has says that in order to continue to make this valid, that it has to be in that area. When you put things in like that, it opens up to people not trusting because they see, as it was stated earlier, they feel like, well, if you put it there, if it doesn't work, or if it does work, then you're opening up, and the more you do that, the more land that they are losing. When you're looking at a historical property, it should be kept as much as it is without making a lot of changes. We've seen 60 Minutes, we've seen PBS, all other entities, CNN, all over the state and world, all over this state, the nation, and the world come in because they know how valuable this is. We've been putting our minds together, trying to figure out how to go in and rebuild and make it grow and bring pride into the community. And if this entity that wants to put the marketplace has the same care and value for that area, why don't they get together with the rest of us and say, let's work this out? We could probably do it, but as long as people are afraid, and I noticed, and maybe it's my legal background, but I noticed when you're asking him questions, he doesn't really come right out. You know, he doesn't seem to know, well, maybe, you know, if we complete this well, there's a possibility. When you want something, you have to be exact. And if people continue to fight you, then that means you have not answered their questions so that they are comfortable with what you want to do. The other thing that I would like to say is that opening a market 3 days a week, it sounds like a flea market to me. And I'm not trying to be rude, but this is what's going through my head. You know, there's, we may extend it to more days. It depends on, a plan has to be in place where you can say, this is exactly what we want to do, and this is how we want to do it. It sounds like they're waiting to hear what the opposition is, and then they're going to try to go in and tweak it to make it fit what the people don't like after the fact. So there may be more to it. I'm still doing my homework on it, but the community needs to be brought in one way, and the people need to understand, need to be able to sit, listen, and ask questions, because I don't know what church people he talked to, but I do know the ones that I talked to. They were like, no, we don't want this, because the more we do, if we do this, we're going to lose more land. The more land we lose, the less that we can preserve our historical value. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of the board? All right.
I really, my question to the board is.
No, I was asking the
has
board
there
to ask
been
a question for you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. Go right ahead.
Yes.
I do have a question for Dr. Crittenden. Dr.
Yes, sir.
Crittenden, when you say that allowing something like this, threatens that you lose more land, when you say that, are you referring to losing more land to commercial use as opposed to, envisioning residential use on that property or in that area?
Commercial use. The people I talk to have no problem with residential, none at all, because they want to see their area revitalized. And we're working towards that. But they're concerned about that little, it's like, if you have a pimple and then you scratch it and then it spreads, and then it's small, but then it begins to spread more and more and more. And next thing, you've got this huge thing going on that you can't control. So they're concerned about the commercial use. They want the residences.
Right. I guess two things. One is, I just always envisioned this as a transition, kind of a placeholder for an area that's really struggled to get anything going while things are taking shape with the Africatown, redevelopment, and that it wasn't something that was a commercial use that was in perpetuity, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd be curious to your comments on that. But secondly, as a person who is in the commercial real estate business, I just also never envisioned that heavy traffic area, as being one that would, be more applicable for residential use than it would be for some type of well thought out planned commercial use. And I think that's why I was so surprised back in October. So those are my comments. I'd be curious, to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's a lack of trust. I think it's the bottom line. It's a lack of trust. And historically, from what I've seen and what I've heard and what I've read, there just seems to be a lot of mistrust. And I don't believe that there's anything that says that whatever commercial portion is could never, ever, ever be. I think that it behooves those that want to do it to take the time to get the feel of the people and let the people feel as though they have input. Let them feel as though they're important. Get their trust. If once you get someone's trust, you can get just about anything that you want. But when people don't trust you, it's difficult to get the simplest thing.
Do you feel like that lack of trust is with Mr. Jones or with the property owner, or both?
My understanding is that it's with both. That and if you want me to be honest, I'm just going to do that. My understanding from what I've heard that it's a combination of both. That one is opening a door for the other one to do eventually what they want to do. Now, this doesn't make it true, but this is what I'm hearing from from different people that I talk to. that they just don't trust the process. If we could get together and work together, we could probably get all of this worked out. And I understand he says he's under a deadline. He's got to hurry. But I think sometimes you need to wait and make sure that you're doing the right thing. And then the opposition, if the people are comfortable and they understand what you're doing, the purpose in doing it, then people will tend to say, well, I may not really agree with it too much, but you know what? I'm going to trust you enough to say, hey, let's do this.
Right.
So I would really like to, if Jared would want to meet with me, I'd like to, and those that are involved in that, let us get together and just kind of figure out what we're going to do, because it cannot be an individual project, no matter which side you're on. It has to be inclusive.
Right.
And that's the only way that it's going to work.
My last question question would be, do you feel like if you were assured without any doubt that this use would not set a precedent for a commercial use there in the future, do you think that would change people's opinion?
But see, the thing is, yeah, it would. But the concern is, how do you can't guarantee that. On one end, we say if it's successful, then we can do this and expand and do that. But what happens if it's zoned for commercial and is not successful, and those powers that be say, well, since it's already zoned commercial, let's just go ahead and take that down and do something else?
Well, see, and that's where I think the misconception is that this has nothing to do with rezoning the property. That property will still be, zoned as it is now. And so I think that that's been at least the misconception that
Right.
I have seen throughout this process, is that, people believe it's going to be a rezoning, and that's not what this application is.
All right, Mr. Metcalf.
Well, I realize other people need to speak, so I'm going to stop talking and allow those others that wish to speak, and perhaps we can come to some kind of conclusion on this matter. Thank you for allowing me this time.
All right, thank you. Mr. Metcalf, you had a question?
Yes. Couple things. One, now that the opposition is all in the meeting, and we just heard from the doctor and said exactly what I referred to at the beginning of the meeting. This is not a rezoning of this property. Please listen. It is not. It is a variance, and variances, they are specific. They're specific to the use that's being proposed. And also the doctor said, this historic property, this property is a parking lot. And we all know good and well that there is zero residential value to this property. And they're just using all these excuses because they don't want something or they don't trust. But it really is not about what the use of the property is. And also, I'd like for people to consider that property is owned by private people. They say you don't want to lose a property. Well, they don't own the property. And I'm going to leave it at that.
All right, Margaret, we have others in the waiting room.
Yes, sir. They are in the meeting. The second person signed up to speak is Mr. Joe Womack.
Mr. Womack.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir. Your name and address for the record, please.
I'm retired Marine Major Joe Womack, Africa Town born, current address 2816 Westmore Court.
Okay.
When we were here last time in the meeting, I think you all ended it by asking the group, the ACDC, to meet with the community to see what they could do. Well, they never did meet with the community. They never have. They had plenty of time. They never did, and they never do meet with the community on anything. But one of the pastors at Union Baptist Church, the Church of the Slaves, actually talked to Cleon and told him he could utilize, if he wanted to, his parking lot, which is right by the bridge, his parking lot, to put up his farmer's market, but he has to take it down every night because you know, he don't want that stuff in there 24/7. But he could actually utilize Derek Tucker, Pastor Tucker told him he could utilize his parking lot for the farmer's market, and 2 or 3 days a week, but they have to take it down every night. So see, that has been suggested to them, but they don't want to use that. I have in my hand a copy of the Africa Town plan, and that plan, if you look on the very front cover, right at the top, standing up, giving the instruction is Mr. Cleon Jones. So he was a big part of putting this plan together, and so were I. And so this plan was put together by the community, not just one person. And this plan has worked for us, worked for the community, been very successful. As a matter of fact, over the last few months, over $5 million have been approved to come into this community to help renovate it. And our projection and our goal is that over the next 10 years that we're going to try to secure $100 million to renovate the community, to help the community and help the city with more taxes coming into the city. If you know anything about the Lynching Museum up there in Montgomery, after they opened their doors, after 12 months, the city realized a tax increase of over $1 billion. $1 billion, that's real-time money. And we've been told by the people in Montgomery at the Alabama Historical Commission that we have a better story. We've got a better story, and we could do. That's why they've invested $1 million to try to pull up that ship and get as much out of that ship as they can, and they expect to establish a park up there. So there's plenty of financial potential in Africa Town if it's done right. Now, this plan that I mentioned, it was explained to the community. It was approved by the Planning Commission, and it was explained before it went before the Planning Commission to everybody that participated, every inch of what was in here. And in here, it specifically says, well, the community had talked about a farmer's market before the plan, but it specifically said, if you want to put up a farmer's market, put it on the east side of the community and not the south side. And so there's area on the east side on Paper Mill Road there that this plan says you can put it. So don't put it on the south side because that's one of the major entrances to the community. It would and we want to try to make every entrance beautiful. But on the east side, you mentioned the credit union. That's a big parking lot in the credit union. That belongs to the Mill family, the Chippewa Lakes. Negotiate a deal there. See, that credit union is a prime example of an area that's zoned residential that has a commercial building on it. And see, there's nothing we can do to it because they got that big commercial building there. If it was residential, then part of our plans would be the plan to put some residents in it, put some apartments there. Now, I know the community I know Chippewa Lakes own that land. They own the land, they own that parking lot, they own the old credit union, they own other areas within the community that not even they didn't allow their land to be part of the historic district, although it's part of Africa Town. And they didn't want it done that way so they could eventually change the zoning and put businesses in there. We know that this area that we're looking at right now used to be houses in there, houses years ago. But the land, of course, was owned by the Mill family. They eventually, when they made the Africa Town Bridge longer, they moved the people out, and they got out of the house leasing business because they owned just about as much land in Africa Town as we did. So we know what their purpose is. We know that they exist to make money off their land. And so, but this property, according to what we're planning in the future, we could show them where they can make money off the land by maybe putting up some apartments to bring people back into the community. And that's what we're looking for. And so this plan that was put together by the community and approved by, among other people, Cleon Jones, whose name is also mentioned as one of the steering committee members, it was approved and it was explained. And in this plan is that you all read last time, it says no farmers market on the south side, none. Put it on the east side. So it said, don't, you know, we don't want it there. That's what the people say. And so trust has to go along with this. This plan, we recently submitted this plan along with a proposal to the National Preservation Federation Cultural Action Fund. They approved $50,000 for our new foundation to hire an executive director. This plan is getting us money, and the money that we're going to be using to renovate Africatown. We are working with Penn State, that's Penn State in Pennsylvania, and they're putting together for us a big fundraiser plan. And like I mentioned, the fundraising plan calls for us to raise $100 million over the next 10 years. And it's all because of this plan. We like this plan. It's working for us. And so we're going to stick to it.
In your
Yes, sir.
statement, you mentioned that there was another area that was designated, or areas for a farmer's market. Are they available to this?
No,
group?
I didn't. What I mentioned was that Pastor Tucker with Union Baptist Church, the Church of the Slaves, actually asked Code Cleaner he could utilize his parking lot if he wanted to.
You referenced on the east side, there was areas that were.
On the east side, yes. On the east side is the old credit union from Scott. It's been closed down for about 30 years.
So
and there's nothing we can do to it.
So that property is currently not utilized?
It's not utilized at all. It belongs to the Chippewa Lakes, the Mayer family, but they have a big parking lot over there too, and it's right around the corner from where you try. But that's why this plan should put it on the east side, and that's what they were referring to. That's the east side of the community.
Okay.
It's right there, right around the corner.
All right. Do you have anything additional to add that we haven't already heard?
Well, only that, as Dr. Crittenden mentioned, the trust is there, and it's with the community, Chippewa Lakes, and Mr. ACDC, Mr. Jones. The plan says no more loss of land through various ordinance of any. What we have as residential now, we want all of that to remain intact because we have a plan to use it to bring the people back. You can call it a variance use, you can call it zoning adjustment, you can call it a planning committee adjustment or rezoning, whatever it is, it will move it from a residential to a business. The notice that you all put out says that you can't use a farmer's market in something zone residential. So what that tells me is that you've got to change it. That's a zoning change. You can dress it up as much as you want. That's I know.
Mr. Metcalf.
But anyway.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Anyway, but the plan, and we've been sticking to this plan. We've been very successful. It says basically leave our residential sections alone. And that's what we're pushing. It's been successful. We've got over $5.5 million approved to renovate the community. And that Welcome Center site you're talking about, I know all about it because me and 5 of my buddies, we are the ones that went in and asked for the money and got it approved through the BP funding process, $3.5 million. We did that. I did that, so I know all about it.
All right. Any questions of the board for Mr. Womack? All right. Well, thank you again, sir. Margaret, do we have others in the waiting room?
Yes, sir, we do. The next person up to speak is Monique Harden.
Okay, Ms. Harden.
Hi, good afternoon. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, your name and address, please.
Sure. Monique Harden. My address is 9801 Lake Forest Boulevard. We're in New Orleans, Louisiana. The Deep South Center for Environmental Justice is a partner with the Chess community led by Major Joe Womack. And we are part of a consortium called the Gulf Coast Equity Consortium that brings together the Chess Community Organization as a community-based group with other community-based organizations through the Gulf Coast region, all working in furtherance of achieving environmental justice, which is centered on the self-determination of communities to speak for themselves, to realize a vision they have for health, equity, and wellness. I want to just focus my comments on the public interest concerns around this use variance. You'll note in my written comments I submitted on the portal, I think I correctly referred to it as a use variance throughout. But let me just begin by saying that it certainly undermines public interest to have a proposed development in an area where neighbors are not consulted, where their concerns are not heard, and where there's no effort to try to work towards resolution, mitigate any of the concerns or adverse effects of the proposal. None of that took place here. So I don't know how this can be even seen to serve the public interest when you don't have that level of public community engagement. Next, I'd like to say that I don't know how it serves the public interest to have such an excessive parcel of land change through a use variance from residential use to commercial use for such a small operation that would only operate seasonally, for which there are many other options. I think it's also important in terms of serving the public interest is to also have in mind corrective action, to right the wrongs of the past. And when we're talking about Africatown, as I'm sure you all know on the Board of Zoning Adjustments, we're talking about a community where land use decisions were not always made in a way that was fair to the residents. As a result, there's legacy contamination issues. There's the largest number of industrial facilities, some that release most of the pollution in Mobile County are right there in the Africatown community. This is an opportunity to get it right, to make sure that the decisions that come out of the board from this point forward are conducive to meeting the needs and respecting the interests of residents in Africatown. It would also set a signal to any other potential developers that they should do the same. That's important. And then I just want to touch on the work of the Chess community and Africatown residents to do the hard work of uplifting the stabilization of their community, notwithstanding all of the odds that are against them. And that needs to be commended, not punished, not ignored, not disregarded by with this particular proposal, which is set out in such a way that residents don't feel heard. That needs to change. And I also want to say that the eyes of everyone globally are on Mobile in terms of what is the present decision making that's different from the past. How are we respecting and honoring the historic value of this community if we don't ensure that people have the absolute right and freedoms to participate in decisions that affect their well-being? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions of Ms. Harden? All right, Margaret, do we have a fourth individual?
Yes, Mr. Reginald Hill.
Mr. Hill, your name and address for the record?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, to the representative from Bill Mobile that happen to be there, and to our citizens and stakeholders that are tuned in today, Reggie Hill, 1007 Center Street.
All right. Please proceed.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, I want to address today this application number 6339. The property in the Africatown community. For the past several months, when I wasn't unlawfully ejected from our city council meetings at the hand of our council president, who actually represents this area where this application is being considered, I rose to address many concerns in that community. For the past several months, we've had many agenda items, whether it be the transfer of property, transfer of land, transfer of funds, even I would say in a fair statement, transfer of authority throughout this process in the community. But yet none of those answers have been tended to. We haven't had any response from the administration or the council in regards to these actions that are happening within the community. Yet it is directly impacting the quality of life for the area. And it's not to my surprise because there's so much money engaged with this that we haven't had or direct transparency regarding these matters. As well, we can see, I believe would be a fair statement today from this board, even using different terminologies to basically implement the same idea of removing the idea of the residential concerns in that area. I personally believe that our focus and attention should be in different places right now. Not to say that we don't need to eradicate the problem of a food desert, but I think that our concerns should be heavily focused on the residential population as well as the Mobile County Training School. We understand that once that is dissolved, which many plans would attest to, we would lose residents in the area anyways, and it would just open up the door for more business to come in. So I wanted to highlight a couple of things, not to reiterate things that have already been presented by other members of the community. As far as a separate location, I am familiar with that suggestion from the plan of Africatown to be in the east area. But I would also like to suggest there are other properties within the community that I believe at some point have been zoned commercial that are not being utilized. There was a slide that was pulled up by Ms. Margaret. I believe it was called the FLUM locator map. I'm not sure if that's just FLUM locator or if it's actually called FLUM. But you can see at the corner of Green Street and Susie Ansley Street, where there used to be a church that occupied that area, as well, there used to be a store, Mr. Hubbard's grocery store. So I don't know if that property was considered as an option because, again, we need to alleviate the food desert. But I just think the areas that have residential designation now, we can't risk the idea of losing that. I also wanted to bring up the notion for the transparency that is going on. Now, to my knowledge, ACDC has not hosted a formal meeting with its residents since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, though that is very understandable, we still can't go forth with city business making these decisions without having the direct input of residents in the community. So I would hope that even with the deadline that is coming up, if we were able to send something, maybe a letter from the board urging the state to give us some more time or allow us to look at other areas for this to locate, I believe that it would warrant that opportunity, seeing that there's still so much discord in the area. And I don't think, that the discord, again, is for the elimination of food deserts or the ability to advance the community. It's just a matter of how we're doing it and the transparency and knowing who has the authority to do these things. So we look at before, there were resources that were allocated to specific groups, and now they've been funneled through the city. We look at certain areas of the community that were owned by community-based organizations, and now they've been just transferred over to the city. So we see once again where the community is getting the end of the stick here, but yet it's supposed to be professed as if we're progressing and moving forward. So, I've had my experiences with many of the people who are designated as leaders within the area. And so it's nothing personal here. I'm just looking at the business and moving forward of this area. So again, as we look at development, I believe there are commercial areas that have not been used in the community. And that's right next to a park. So we're used to a lot of traffic being in that area anyways. Those residents are familiar with that stuff happening. And I also believe that we have to have community involvement. And I would know that if the community was engaged, we have a lot less hostility with moving forward in this. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to address the board.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hill. Any questions of the board for Mr. Hill? Okay, Margaret, does that conclude the public hearing and we move back to the applicant's rep, Mr. White, for a response?
Yes, sir, 2-minute rebuttal.
Okay, Mr. White, you still with us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you heard the comments from various representatives in opposition, some of them which we heard previously. So I'll allow you the 2-minute opportunity for rebuttal, please.
Yes, sir. I'll be quick. We heard from somebody who lives in Pritchard, somebody who lives in West Mobile, and somebody who lives in New Orleans in opposition to it. The only resident of the community who addressed this was Mr. Hill. Mr. Hill was not opposed to the concept of a marketplace. He preferred a different location. However, I do submit that this location is an appropriate location. It's consistent with the flume, which you're looking at now. Shows that under the flume, this would be a neighborhood center traditional area. That's where it's located. If I may, I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, well, I can't share, but if I was able to share and you were able to look at, and I don't know if they can enable it, but if you look at the Africatown plan, and this is on page 13 of it, there's a circle for the town center to include a farmer's market, and it circles this property. It is simply disingenuous and incorrect to say that this location is not consistent with the Africatown plan. It is absolutely within the circle in the notation of it says a farmer's market or similar venue for selling locally grown produce could be located in this area either temporarily or permanently. So it is consistent. And you know what I heard, somebody talking about $10 million in grants. Maybe there's a worry that if someone else does something successful in the neighborhood, they may get a call about those grants and a different organization will get them. But that's not what this should be about. This should be about this application, what's best for the community, allowing something to happen. The state has been asked if they will give an extension because of COVID. They will not. COVID has changed. I agree. If it had not been for COVID, we could have had a community meeting and perhaps had more input. I think there's some people who will never agree to this, no matter what, because of different agenda items. But that community meeting cannot occur under the circumstances. But the community concerns from last time were listened to and have been attempted to be addressed. So I would ask the board to support this. I do have 2 requests. This is our last shot at this. So if this fails, the state grant will be lost. We have 5 people here today, 2 of whom voted against our last application. I would ask that if any board members don't think they can support it today, it'd be that board member move to hold it over till the next month's meeting so we can have more board members present and have a full vote on this important issue for our community. Again, I prefer not to be delayed, but if necessary, I'd make that request. Alternatively,
Mr. White,
Yes, sir.
you brought up a good point. You have 5 voting members present, which meets the quorum. If any one of us were to vote in opposition, it would fail.
Yes, sir.
So you as the applicant's rep have the right to request a holdover. With that knowledge that anyone could vote in opposition. Is that your position? You wish to hold over or do you wish to continue with the vote?
I would like a holdover if I'm not going to get 5 votes today.
You can't.
Well, I can't make the motion. I can't make the motion. I'm making clear where I am, which is that if a board member feels like it may not pass today, I'd appreciate a board member making a motion to hold it over.
Okay, so the applicant's rep is requesting holdover if there's, yeah, I don't know that I could do that. Mr. Anderson?
That's kind of going backwards. Yeah, I'm not for or against this application. Y'all do what you want, but taking the route that says, well, let's hold it over if it's not going to get 5 votes is not the way to do it. And if we have 7 people at the meeting next month, we've got to go through this whole scenario all over again so the other 2 members can hear it. So, you know, it's either going to, I think you should let it live or die today.
Okay, but the applicant has the right to request a holdover. Is that not correct?
Sure, but not. We're not going to take a vote.
No, we're not.
Just
You're right.
to decide. Yeah, absolutely has a right to request one, but not for the reason to see if we're going to get 5 votes or not.
Okay. All All right, Mr. White.
Secondly,
Once again, I'll give you the option of, do you wish to have a holdover or do you wish to continue?
I request a holdover.
Okay, you have a request for a holdover. All right.
You're-
Any questions of the board?
Mr. Yes, I have one other question. If the holdover is not granted, I would request that the variances be voted upon separately. For
Oh,
instance.
come
if-
on.
If there was a variance given for everything but use, I think legally we're permitted to conduct this use in a B2, and I would contest that single issue. So there's no rezoning. We would simply have a variance as to the other issues. It'd be my preference to get everything, but if not, I'd ask that that be separated and voted on separately.
That's a reasonable request.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So the applicants requested a holdover. Any questions of the board?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Jared, if you're granted a holdover, do you think there are going to be any more efforts trying to bring the community together behind this? Or do you think it'll be just moving it forward to, have more people at the next board meeting?
Certainly, I would encourage Mr. Jones and his board members to reach out to the community. Again, you didn't really hear from people from the community today with one exception. But I mean, yes, we would make I'd encourage them to make every effort they can within this current climate and distancing and meeting restrictions to try to get word out that this is not about a rezoning, that this is for a temporary market, and that this location is consistent with the Africatown plan the city passed. And certainly to listen if there's a way within this site to move the market around, to operate in a way within the site that's more palatable to the community to do that as well.
Yeah. And I appreciate, I'm just sensitive to the fact, I hear what you're saying about not having opposition from people within the community, but just want to make sure that this forum in a Zoom meeting didn't prevent anybody from doing that. Thanks.
Okay. All right. The applicants requested a holdover.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
One clarification. If it's a holdover until the board's next meeting, that meeting date will be September 14th.
Okay. And Mr. White, is that acceptable?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I muted it.
Okay. All right. I have a motion to hold it over to the next meeting at the applicant's request. Any further discussion of the board?
Who made the motion?
I'm not,
Okay.
I'm asking for a motion at the
Okay.
moment.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mr. Milling has made the motion to hold over for 30 days to the next meeting. Do I have a second?
Second,
And that's Mr. Davis.
Sanford Davis. In all fairness to everyone, I'm seconding the motion by Mr. Millings.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion passes, and this application will be held over to the next meeting. All right, thank you again. Margaret, I'll give you opportunity to clear the waiting room, and we'll go to our next application. Has Mr. Coleman or Mr. Burrows at any time responded to our request? Okay.
Is that, Bill, is that one coming up?
No, you're last. So we got another, I think we got two ahead of you, right? Yeah. We're on application 6340, which is number 10. And your application, or your brother's, is 12, I believe.
Yeah, would it be okay just to hasten things since there's not a quorum, that if he jump on real quick and be done in just a moment?
Sure, if Miss Margaret can move things around. Well, all we're gonna do is request a holdover anyway.
Yeah, but he needs to be here to request it.
Yes, correct.
All right, hold on, Ryan.
All right, we're gonna do application 6342. 200 North Royal Street, Metcalf and Company. While the applicant's available.
There you go. Just tell them you're here. This is Brian Metcalf. I'm here.
All right, Mr. Metcalf, we do not have a quorum as it relates to this application for 200 North Royal Street, application 6342, with Mr. Metcalf, your brother, recusing himself. That leaves us with 4.
Right.
Do you request a holdover?
Yes, I would appreciate that.
Okay, and seeing how we don't have a quorum to vote on it, Margaret, would that not automatically make it?
Well, I'm not sure of the rule, but I would appreciate it if it held over to the.
It'll be the September 14th meeting.
Okay.
Doug, I think that can be automatic in light of
Yeah,
it.
that's an automatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, failure to have a quorum is not the applicant's fault. Okay, well, Mr. Metcalf, we will see you at the next meeting.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, our apologies about your brother.
Well, no need. Thank you.
All right, application 6340, Clark Greer Latham. This is 146 Highland Avenue.
That's correct, and I've admitted William Lotta and Wes Pipes.
Okay, are they in for the application or opposition?
They are the applicants.
Okay, and this one's recommended for approval with conditions, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
William, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
What about Wes? Can you hear us?
I can hear you and I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Your name and address for the record?
Yeah, my name is William Latta, 3901 Spring Hill Avenue. We're generally in agreement with the recommendation for approval. We just want to clarify one of the comments that was really made in the remarks, but I guess it would fall under condition number 9, the full compliance with all other municipal codes and ordinances. And that is regarding the parking lot screening between residential districts. The property to the east is currently used as a church, a separate church than the one that will be using this parking lot. The property to the west across Highland Avenue is the church that is utilizing this parking lot. To the south is a residential home, and to the north we have Spring Hill Avenue, which is a major road on the major roads plan for the city. So what we would like to clarify it as a screening between residential uses instead of residential districts. And so that would have us screening the parking lot on the south side for the residential home, but not on the east and west sides abutting the churches.
Okay, Bert or Margaret, is that how you would understand the requirement as a condition?
Well, the screening requirement, I believe, is by district, and it would not apply across Spring Hill Avenue since that's a major street, but it would apply to the church that the parking lot is for, as well as the abutting church to the east. Given, however, that the parking lot is for the church on the west side of Highland, I would imagine that it would seem reasonable to not require the screening on that side at this time.
Okay. Is the applicant willing to consider on the east and the south as a condition?
We are. One thing to note, seeing as how the church to the east abuts our site, which is a residentially zoned site, they have not provided any screening either. So if that plays into any consideration, I would just like to make that note. But yes, we are willing to consider the east and south side.
Okay, any questions of the board for the applicant?
Where are you now?
Adam, we can't hear you.
Out there.
Okay, once again, any questions of the board for the applicant? Okay, you had somebody that also was interested in speaking in favor of this application, Margaret?
Yes, that's Wes Pipes.
Okay, and will you,
He's here.
okay, Mr. Pipes,
Yes,
do you have anything to add, or are you in agreement with the conditions?
I'm in agreement with the conditions, and I'm basically leaning on Mr. Latta to make all the, the technical responses and everything, but I'm simply here to show my support for our application.
Okay, and one of the conditions was removing an existing structure or structures.
Yes.
Okay, I see it. All right. And are we clear on that the condition for, if the board should choose, for the residential buffer would be to the south and to the east? And there'd be consideration on the west, since this will serve the church that's on across Highland as a condition?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that, just to be clear, that the conditions stipulate, if the board so chooses, where the buffer fence would go.
Right.
If the board is understandably considering not having it along Highland because that's the church for which it's associated, I would say provision of a buffer fence along the south, and then depending on the board's determination, reference whether or not it would be provided to the east as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. All right. Any questions of the board? And Margaret, you stated earlier there's no one in the room that's in opposition. Is that correct?
That is correct. We received no record of opposition and no one in the meeting.
Okay, and no communications from the
Correct.
community? Okay. All right. Thank you. Will Chair entertain a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve it. I'm going to make my motion with only a fence on the south.
Okay, we have a motion to approve with a condition of only having the fence, the buffer on the south near the residential.
Correct.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Metcalf, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right, this will be our last one now that we get caught up. 6341. Margaret, you want to admit those to the meeting?
I've admitted Jay Watkins, representative for this application.
And we have no one else? Either
That's
for or
correct.
opposition?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Watkins, name and address, please.
Hey, good afternoon. It's Jay Watkins. I'm at Maynard, Cooper and Gale, 11 North Water Street, Suite 24290, Mobile 36602, representing First Street Partners, LLC, in connection with the application.
Okay, and has your client reviewed the application and the requirements from the
Yes,
staff?
sir. They've reviewed staff recommendations, and all conditions and comments are in agreement with all those.
Okay, and just for the record, the staff recommends approval subject to some conditions, upwards, looks like about 11.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and this is for parking, maneuvering surface variance, and the buffer stops.
Correct.
Okay, any questions of the board for the applicant? Okay, Chair, I entertain a motion.
Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve.
Subject to staff.
Subject to staff recommendations.
Okay.
Second.
and I have a motion by Mr. Milling, second by who?
Sanford Davis, Sanford.
Mr. Davis? All right, thank you. And any further questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, and I think the last item for our agenda today is the approval of minutes from the administrative review of May 4th.
That's correct.
All right, has everyone had the opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, any corrections? Okay, Chair, entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Millings, second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right, Mr. Anderson, anything else?
No, sir.
All right, well, thank you again. Margaret, thank you for coordination.
You're welcome.
All right, you all stay well and see you next time.
Thank you.
Good day.
See ya.
Margaret,